Right, hi guys. So in this video we're going to take a look at kind of what most people get wrong when they're starting a remote service business. And there's a few things that we can break down around that. Simply the biggest mistakes when you're getting started. How to work on a business, not in a business. You've probably heard of that saying before. Then we're going to do a focus around clients and lead generation, and then specifically the smart scaling method, which is really important because you have to scale smart. So when it comes to the biggest mistakes, obviously if you watched all my YouTube videos, you'll know that doing the work yourself is one of the biggest mistakes. Straight away, we're working in the business, not on the business. We want to avoid doing the work ourselves, and we do that by using contractors. It's one of the easiest ways to grow a remote service business, simple as that. And it means that you can focus on the growth and leads of the business and things like that. And again, you're working on the business, not in it. The next thing is really like focusing on the wrong type of things. So things like a name, your branding, your logo. It doesn't make sense to really focus on these things right at the start. In terms of a setup, getting a good online setup framework, absolutely crucial, but it doesn't have to be perfect. It can always be changed as you go along. A bit like a business plan. You set up a business plan, the business plan can always be adapted. The same applies to a name, it applies to branding, logos, things like that. Even really getting your website like absolutely perfect, again, that doesn't need to happen straight away. As you develop projects and business and things like that, you'll get a lot more social proof, you'll get testimonials, reviews, pictures from jobs. Then we can start to make adaptations to the website if you want to have a branding refocus, things like that. Like if I showed you my first company, the logo was created in 2 minutes on a free logo builder. The name was the initials of some of my family members, and the branding was pretty terrible, to be honest with you. It definitely wasn't anything exciting, and the website I used a free website builder just to get a website out there, and then I could start promoting the business. I could start doing my growth, getting in lead generation, and then I started to get my projects and start building out the website. I changed the name of the business after about a year. And then really, built the website properly with branding and so on and so forth, because I had the money to do so as well. When you start building the business, obviously after a year's growth, you've got the money to start investing in web developers and things like that, and really focusing around SEO and your branding and getting a real brand out there. The next thing is about scaling too fast and not smart, and that's where the smart scaling method comes in. The issue with scaling too fast is not being able to take on all the leads, finding yourself, just completely overwhelmed with dealing with the operations, the contractor costs, making sure that the clients are actually happy with the job. We're not focusing on like client results, if you like, by making sure the jobs are perfect and that we're retaining the client. We're just focusing on, right, let's hammer lead generation, pump loads of money into paid advertising, for example. You're just going to get inundated with leads and you won't be able to take them all on. And it's just pointless, because our cost per acquisition will go up, but our ad spend will still be quite high, but you'll be losing out on a lot of leads because you won't be able to take them on. So that's where we're going to take a look at the smart scaling method. And finally, niching down too early. So if you've kind of never owned one of these types of businesses before, it's best to incorporate a number of different services, which I'll break down for you later on in the video, to really see where you might niche down into eventually. So my first company, I focused on contract cleaning. We were doing construction cleans. We did everything from jet washing, window cleaning. I basically took on absolutely everything at the start, and that gave me a really good position to grow my business, quit my job, and then I could say, right, let's start taking a look at the margins. Where's our best margins coming from? What services don't we want to advertise for anymore? If we get some organic ones coming, fine, we'll probably still take it on if we've got the contractors in place to do so. And that, like my first business, really niched down on like construction cleaning and commercial contracts. And then I started getting new services as well, where I was kind of hearing about new services that were like really good in the markets. Some of my contractors were already doing the services, so I began taking them on. And then, like, my second business was solely focused around external cleaning services, because I saw the best margins from them in my current business. So from there I looked to scale that business, and now my current cleaning company is mainly focused around commercial contracts. At the same time, I do have other services that I know that my contractors do, just in case that work comes in, but I don't necessarily advertise for it. So niching down way too early isn't something that you want to do right at the start. So how to work on a business, not in the business. It's something that I've always focused on. And in my early stages, I got suckered into working in the business. If you know my business background, you'll know that I did like my first cleaning jobs myself, decided it was an absolute nightmare. And then I went down the staffing route. Again, staff, absolute nightmare. I've probably told you the story about one of the boys crashing one of my vans, and it cost me over £3,500 to fix it. And then working with contractors, which meant I could start to work on the business, really focus on lead generation, things like that. So one thing to remember here is don't be the worker, be the owner. And that's where we're going to work on the business. So simply put, your job is to get clients initially and focus on lead generation. That's your first job in the business. You've done a good online setup framework, the business is out there, we're ready to go, we're rocking and rolling. So what do we need to do next? We need to get clients. So we're going to focus on lead generation to start with. Then I want you to focus on the numbers. I want you to start taking a look at the numbers that are coming in. We can take a look at your cost per lead, your cost per acquisition, our profit margins, our return on ad spend. That way, when we focus on the margins of the services, we're going to look to grow. Simple as that. And we're looking at kind of what services have got the best margins at the moment. If there are some services that we spend the same amount of time on to get the job across the line and make sure the contractor does the job and the client signs it off, why would we spend as much time in a service that doesn't give us the same amount of margin as another service that gives us better margins? So that's something that you want to be taking a look at as you continue to scale smartly. From here, we want to look at expansion with growth. So we're going to look at expanding our contractor database so that you can branch out into new locations as well. You don't want to focus on employees. Like I said, the reason being is because employees in a startup business can be a nightmare. You can 100% get to a place where you could take on some employees for maybe like certain contracts and things like that. Like school cleaning contracts, for example, are quite a good position to take on PAYE because there are certain aspects in the contract that mean you don't have to worry about holidays and things like that. But again, focusing on expanding your contractors means that we can branch out locations wise, we can take on new services. If you want to expand on the current services that are doing really well, you may need more contractors because your current contractors might not be able to take on all of the work. They've probably got some of their own work as well, so they might not be able to take on everything. So we're looking at expansion, we're not looking at employees, that way we're going to grow. Then as we continue with our lead generation, we kind of want to automate that process. If you can have a sales process that's completely automated, that runs round the clock, this is my terrible diagram here, but that is how a sales process should look. It's a complete process that continues to go round and round and round. No matter what, you take a week's holiday, that sales process continues. So you want to automate your lead generation. You can obviously do that with paid advertising. You can do that with organic outreach and things like that. And having systems in place where you continue that sales process. So make sure that we're never having to worry about leads. You don't want to be in a position where you don't know where your next job is coming from. And we do that with an automated sales process. So what we're going to do then is focus on the clients and the leads. So simply, when you're first starting off, we want paying clients. We want clients that are going to pay, they're going to pay well, and you're going to have good margins on the job. You're going to have an online setup framework completely set up, but it's not going to be perfect. And that's absolutely fine. Like I said, we can amend this as we continue. We're going to also look to get the operations dialed in. So if we can kind of automate that process a bit as well, and we do that with onboarding the likes of VRs and VAs, you can hire a contract manager as well if you want to. When we dial in the operations, it becomes a lot simpler. The business feels really, really easy. And as you know, I love making a business feel easy. That's exactly how a business should feel. It shouldn't feel stressful. It shouldn't feel like a pain in the arse. It should feel easy so that eventually you could exit one day and you could tell the person that's buying the business simply how easy the business has been to run. And how we do that, so in terms of operations, we're obviously going to get a lead coming in. That's number one. And then we're passing that lead off to a contractor. And then we want that job to then become a client. So the lead becomes the client. The client goes into job completion. The job gets completed. The contractor does the job. Everything's obviously previously agreed with the client in terms of specification, cost, and like start date, things like that. The job gets completed. You get paid, and then you rinse and repeat. That's a very, very easy system to run in a business. If you can't run that, there's not an easier business to run with that kind of system. There's honestly not. Lead specification to contractor. Contractor does specification costs. We get the client approval. We move on to job completion. Get paid. Rinse and repeat. Rinse and repeat that process on every single job. And again, it makes the business feel easy. So that's a very simple operative way to dial in your operations process. Okay, so moving on to the smart scaling method. In terms of setup, we said about not niching down too early. Okay, so numerous services is where we're going to start. We find that a good space is around about 7 to 10 services to start with. My current cleaning company still only does about 14 services. You don't need many more than that. So numerous services to start with. We look at 7 to 10 services. Again, if you've seen some of my videos, you know we look at some recurring revenue services, some like day-to-day upsells that we can still advertise to, and then some higher profit margin services as well. We want to focus on the best margins as we begin to use our smart scaling method. So focusing on the best margin services means that we can put more attention into those services. Because like I said, if you've got a service, 2 services that take the same amount of time, but one of them gives you a 20% profit margin, the other one gives you a 50% profit margin, we need to be putting more time into the service that is giving us those better margins, which in turn means that we're going to scale quicker. So what we can do at that point is we can increase the margins as our demand grows for that type of service. So if you find that you're in high demand, you have a service that's dialed in, 2, 3, 4, 5 services, then start to push the boundaries on those services a little bit more. Let's say we're doing 50% markups. Let's start to push those boundaries a little bit more until we hit friction. When we hit friction, we kind of know that our prices are in the right place. And don't necessarily do this with new clients, because new clients we want to get across the line to start with. Existing clients is where we can really try to increase the margins, because they're going to be coming to you. You'll find that you will get clients that won't look at anyone else's prices. They won't bother getting at anyone else's prices. I have clients that I work with to this day that will only use me. They'll send me a specification, I'll come up with the cost. And on occasions they might come back and say it's a little bit too high, Nathan, is there anything that you can do on it? Then, I'll negotiate. I'll come down, I'll get the contractor to bring his cost down so I still keep my margin strong. And they're the ones that, again, you can begin to test the margins. I kind of know with my clients where I can sit in terms of my margin to make sure that it's as profitable as it can be. So what we can do then is we're going to reinvest further into paid advertising. So if you're already running like local services ads, for example, we can look to scale that further to see if we can increase lead flow for the different services that we're doing. Where we categorize everything, it's very easy to do so, to make sure that we're pumping money into the services that we want. You know, we want those services that give us the best margins. So we'll increase our ad spend and reinvest further into it as well. We can look at different strategies that are more automated. If you wanted to focus around a real commercial strategy, for example, then we create new campaigns and look to scale it that way, specifically for the best margin services again here. And then again, with the sales process, this is where we really want to continue to automate it. And like I said, you get that automated sales process, lead generation will be one of the easiest things you will ever do. So we're going to begin to look to automate the sales process as part of the smart scaling method. And that in turn is just going to give that continuous flow of leads, which is what so many people desire in a business. So smart scaling as a whole means that we're going to be looking at higher profits but less stress, because we're not dealing with the same amount of time for a service that might give us 10-20% margins. We want the services that are really pushing the boundaries with 50% upwards. At the same time, you're always going to have your kind of contracts and things like that that will be slightly smaller margins, but your upsells on those contracts we can push the boundaries with again. So smart scaling means higher profits, which equals less stress. So as always, guys, I'll put a note in the comment section if you want to have a chat with me or my team. As always, I hope this helps. If there's anything else that you want me to go over, I've got a big old list of videos that I want to get through over pretty much the next year. But at the same time, if there's anything that kind of comes to mind, please just put a note in the comment section and I'll be more than happy to do a video on it and help you out where I can. See you soon.